back with another game. This time it's going to be the Benko Gambit, and I have a game between Vukic and Pal Benko from Sarajevo in 1967. And this game I picked because it's a line that you're going to see a lot in your games if you play this. And I'll just jump right into it. D4, knight f6, c5, or c4, c5. And this is the starting position for black if you're trying to play a Benko Gambit, or if you're going to play a Benoni. So if you're going to play Benoni, you start with e6 right here. And those are lines that you can look into if you're interested. But the Benoni tends to be a little bit more drawish, where the Benko tends to be a lot more tactical. And so b5 is the move we play if you want the Benko Gambit. This pawn was taken. a6, that's a standard Benko move there. Takes on a6, and bishop takes a6. Now, these days, a popular way to play is just not even taking this pawn and playing g6 and bishop g7. And the idea of that is later you're going to go queen a5, and you'll basically have an option of taking with either minor piece or the queen under different circumstances. So that's another interesting line to look into. Give me 1 second. Okay, so in this game, Benko took with the bishop, and that's the old school way of playing there. And knight c3 is the main option here for white. d6 and knight f3. So white just gets his knights out, and here you'll see. Well, after g6 here, you'll see a lot of moves. For white, you'll see e4 mainly. You'll also see g3 here. G3 was played in the game, and bishop g7 was played. Bishop g2 and castle. Now, I think Lev Albert, maybe like sometime in the 1970s, introduced this idea of going knight b7 here and delaying castling, so that when white castles, you can go knight b6 and try to get an attack against this d pawn here. That's just another option, just another way of playing. And I think, honestly, I don't think it's any better than the line that was played here in this early Benko game. But we'll see. Knight b to d7, queen c2. So queen c2 is really just trying to reinforce this center. e4 is the move that white really wants to get in. Queen b6. You'll often see the queen go to either b6 or a5 in these lines, mostly b6. And this has the purpose of allowing this other rook to get in. And mostly this opening is about controlling these two files. And there's a lot of just subtle knight maneuvers that you'll need to get the hang of also if you're going to play it. Rook d1 was played in the game, and rook b8. So there we go. Black is controlling these two files. That's where his attack is going to lie. Rook b1 was played in the game. And white was just trying to overprotect this square, because you can see it's being x-rayed and it's being attacked twice. He's just trying to add one more defender on there so that when the knight moves here, bishop g5, so attacking this weak pawn. And now queen d8 was played in the game, and you might say, oh, okay, well, that looks like a waste of time because the queen went to b6, and then after bishop g5, the queen had to go back to d8 to defend the e pawn. But really, there was a method to this madness. The queen had to come here just to get out of the way of this rook and get this rook to a better square. So that was kind of the point of that. Bishop f1 looks kind of passive, but this is a very active bishop for black, and white would like to trade these light square bishops off, which is a good in principle for white, but also it's going to create these light square weaknesses around his king. So there's a plus side and there's a minus to this move and this plan of trading the bishops. Now, h6 was played by Benko. Bishop d2 and knight c7. b3, knight b6. So this is pretty typical. In some lines, assuming there's no pawn here, this knight can end up on c4. But in general, this is a pretty typical knight maneuver for the Benko. And also, in this position, black is trying to attack this pawn and kind of force white to have to play this move. And we'll see. e4 was actually played. Bishop takes f1. Rook takes f1, queen d7. And after rook f to e1, king h7, king g2, e6. So e6 is another typical break here for black. He didn't really have that much influence on the king side, so he's trying to hit the center. D takes e6. Knight takes on e6. Knight e2, d5 was played. So black got a good position out of the opening, I would say. Knight f4 was played in the game. D takes e4, rook takes e4, knight d4 attacking the queen, knight takes d4, and c takes. Okay, so I like the position already. So there's this isolated pawn. These two files are open, but black has free development of pieces here. A4 was actually a mistake, according to Benko. And in Benko's book, he mentions that knight d3 would have been met by rook c8, and after the queen moves, queen b5. Really nice position for black. So this was in Benko's notes. Also in his notes, if instead of a4 here, rook to e1 was played, we'd have knight d5, and after queen b1, rook a3. So still a little evenish, but you can definitely tell that black has a little bit of pull in that game. Now a4 in the game, queen b7 here. So hitting the rook, which was defended by f3. And now knight takes a4. That move probably came as a shock, because if you take this, obviously, black is just taking twice, and black is going to be winning if you take that knight. Therefore, rook b to e1 was played, but queen takes b3, so black won a pawn and got his rook to a very active square. After rook takes b3, rook e7 was played, rook b2, so attacking that bishop. Rook e2 defending, knight c3, great move. And here I feel like black is starting to have the winning position here. I mean, well, you'll definitely after this knight c3 move. So bishop takes c3, d takes c3. Now this pawn is very dangerous. It's defended by the bishop, and just controlling those files. Okay, so rook f7, rook takes f7 was played in the game. Rook to a2, king f1, g5. Hitting the knight. Rook takes g7 check, intermediate move. Um, if rook e7 was played instead, then rook b1 check. This is going to be over for white, mainly because you can see the king going off or going up to the second rank is going to result in this bishop check, and then take here followed by take here. It's going to be game over. So so after rook takes g7, king takes a7, knight e6 check, king f6, and knight d4. So white's trying to hang on, but rook takes e2, knight takes e2, rook a1 check. And this is going to be game over, mainly because this pawn is just too dangerous, and black is going to get a queen. So this is the first game in the Benko Gambit series. And I guess what I want you to take away is just this basic, the basic layout. So you get this pawn chain, like this beautiful pawn chain. You get your bishop being cutted, and this knight almost always goes to d7 here. And this is your main setup. Queen b6, preparing the rook to go to b8. And now this knight maneuver, which I would actually also consider this in this position, since h3 has not been played. This knight g5 and then knight e5 maneuver is also another popular way to play, but this seemed to work very well in Benko's game. So this is a nice, just little introductory game. You can see how this was the big turning point in the game, was when f3 was met by knight takes on a4. That was just a very, black is just showing his domination of the A and the B files. That's what is oftentimes coming up in the Benko Gambit. So thank you.